Imagine watching your favorite musician perform and realizing the song you're hearing is their last. One legendary guitarist was electrocuted in front of a live audience. Dimebag Darrell was murdered on stage during a concert. Menza collapsed behind his drum kit without warning.
Let it shine on me, and let it shine.
Jackie Wilson suffered a devastating heart attack in the middle of his biggest hit, and one famous singer died while performing an aria about fate itself. These aren't rumors or rock and roll myths. They're documented events witnessed by thousands of fans, backed by eyewitness accounts, official investigations, medical reports, and historical records. Today, we're counting down 15 rock and roll stars who tragically died on stage, revealing exactly what happened in their final moments and how those shocking tragedies changed music history forever. Stay until the end, because some of these stories are almost impossible to believe. Leslie Harvey, Stone the Crows, electrocuted on stage. Leslie Harvey had the kind of talent that could stop people in their tracks. A Scottish guitarist with an electrifying presence, the irony of that word choice wouldn't become apparent until it was too late. He played with Stone the Crows, a band that was starting to make real waves in the rock world. They were on the rise. They were becoming something. But on May 3rd, 1972, during a concert in Swansea, Wales, his career and his life came to a sudden and horrific end. While performing on stage, Harvey unknowingly reached for an ungrounded microphone while gripping his guitar. The jolt of electricity surged through his body, rendering him helpless. The crowd watched in horror. Before anyone could react, the damage was done. He collapsed lifeless on the stage. When medics arrived, there was nothing they could do. At just 27 years old, a rising rock star had been silenced in a way so brutal that it sent chills down the spine of the entire music industry. It was a tragedy that could have been prevented. But as it often goes in rock and roll, safety took a back seat to the spectacle. The irony was cruel. Years earlier, he had been offered a spot in Lynyrd Skynyrd, the very band that would later experience one of rock's most infamous plane crashes. But fate had its own twisted sense of irony. Instead of the sky, it was the very stage where he thrived that took his life. A man who lived for music was taken out by the very thing that fueled his passion. Dimebag Darrell, Damage Plan, shot on stage. Dimebag Darrell didn't just play guitar. He made it scream, cry, and explode with raw energy. His work with Pantera and later Damage Plan cemented his legacy as one of the most blistering guitarists in metal history. The man was a force. When he played, he wasn't just performing. He was channeling something primal. But on December 8th, 2004, in Columbus, Ohio, his final performance turned into a scene straight out of a nightmare. As Damage Plan tore through their set, a gunman stormed the stage and unleashed chaos. He fired shots into the crowd and under the stage. Dimebag was hit multiple times, collapsing as the music screeched to a halt. The crowd was stunned and helpless. Paramedics fought to save his life. But it was too late. The man who had defined an era of heavy metal was gone, eliminated in front of his own fans. The shooter was a former Marine with severe mental health issues. He claimed that Pantera had stolen his music, a twisted delusion that led to one of the most shocking deaths in rock history. Security at the venue was caught off guard. Before anyone could intervene, the damage had been done. It was a brutal reminder that even in the world of music, where artists should be free to pour their souls into their craft, danger still lurks. The industry was rocked to its core, mourning a legend who had so much more to give. A man whose hands could tear through guitar solos with effortless precision was stopped. Not by age, not by substances, but by a bullet. The silence left behind was deafening. Menza, Ommanza, heart failure. Nick Menza wasn't just a drummer. He was a machine. His years with Megadeth solidified his place in metal history, and even after his time with the band, he continued to do what he loved, pounding the drums with a precision that only a select few could match. But on May 21st, 2016, in Los Angeles, California, that relentless rhythm came to an abrupt halt. While performing with his band Ommanza, he suddenly collapsed mid-set. For a split second, the audience thought it might be part of the act, but as he lay motionless, reality set in. Something was terribly wrong. The cause, heart failure. One moment he was lost in the music. The next he was gone. 51 years old, still in his prime, still bringing his energy to the stage. And in an instant, it was over. Unlike some of rock's other tragic losses, there was no violence, no freak accident. Just a heart that decided it had played its last beat. It was an eerie and unsettling way to go. No warning, no grand exit, just silence. A musician who lived for the roar of the crowd was met with the quiet of finality, leaving fans and bandmates in disbelief. The music stopped, and for those who knew and admired Menza, it felt like an entire era had ended with him. Johnny Ace, playing Russian roulette backstage. Johnny Ace had charisma, talent, and a voice that could melt even the hardest hearts. He dominated the rhythm and blues scene in the 1950s, climbing the ranks with his smooth vocals and undeniable charm. He was going places. Everyone knew it. But on December 25th, 1954, backstage at a concert in Houston, Texas, that rising star came crashing down. During a break between sets, Ace started fooling around with a revolver. Whether it was an act of bravado or sheer recklessness, no one will ever know. He spun the cylinder, raised the gun, and pulled the trigger. A single gunshot rang out. And just like that, he was gone. 25 years old. One moment he was laughing and performing. The next his lifeless body was slumped over. The crowd had no idea what had just happened, only that the man they came to see was suddenly no longer there. In the aftermath, stories circulated. Some said he had been showing off, boasting that the gun wasn't loaded. Others claimed it was a drunken mistake. Either way, it didn't matter. The result was the same. One of R&B's most promising voices was silenced by his own hand. It was a senseless and entirely avoidable death. The kind that left fans shaking their heads and wondering how someone so talented, so young, could make a decision that ended it all in a single second. Jackie Wilson. Heart attack during Lonely Teardrops. Imagine pouring every ounce of your soul into a song, giving the crowd exactly what they came for. And then, just like that, your body gives out. That's exactly what happened to Jackie Wilson on the night of September 29, 1975 in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The man was deep into Lonely Teardrops, a song that had made audiences swoon for years when his body decided it had had enough. Right there, mid-performance, he suffered a massive heart attack and hit the stage like a falling statue. The audience thought it was part of the act. The dramatic collapse. The way he slumped onto the floor. It seemed too surreal to be anything but showmanship. But Wilson wasn't faking anything. His heart had stopped playing along. And his body soon followed. Paramedics rushed to the scene. But the damage had already been done. The lack of oxygen to his brain left him in a persistent vegetative state, one that would stretch on for 9 agonizing years. His family, his fans, and those who had once called him a legend watched helplessly as the man once known as Mr. Excitement was reduced to silence. He spent those years in a nursing home, his once electric energy drained down to a shell of what he used to be. And when he finally passed away on January 21st, 1984, it was almost as if the world had forgotten the electricity he once brought to the stage. A man who had defined an era was gone. His final moments spent in agony on the very stage that had made him famous. Frank Zappa, pushed off stage into orchestra pit. Frank Zappa wasn't the kind of musician who played by the rules, and maybe that's why the universe decided to test just how tough he really was. It happened on December 10th, 1971, at London's Rainbow Theatre. Zappa was in his element, tearing through his set, when a deranged fan decided to make himself part of music history. Out of nowhere, the guy charged the stage and shoved Zappa straight off the edge. The musician didn't just fall. He crashed down into the orchestra pit, breaking bones, rattling his skull. The injuries were brutal: a crushed larynx, a broken leg, a concussion that would change his voice forever. Forever. The physical trauma was bad enough, but the long-term effects were worse. Zappa spent months in recovery. His ability to perform altered permanently. His voice, once powerful and distinct, was left with a lower pitch, a constant reminder of the violence that had been inflicted on him. But beyond the physical toll, there was the psychological weight. Zappa had never been the kind of musician to play it safe. But after that night, he was forced to consider his own mortality in a way he never had before. He may have survived the fall, but it left him permanently altered. The man who had once been unstoppable suddenly had limits. And in the end, it wasn't the music industry or the critics that slowed him down. It was a single moment of madness that stole the fire from one of rock's most rebellious spirits. Even after recovering, Zappa could never fully shake the impact of that night. The injuries forced him to change his performances, shifting his focus more toward composition and studio work than the physically demanding live shows that had made him a star. Judge Dredd, Heart Attack in Canterbury. If there was ever a musician who lived for shock value, it was Judge Dredd. The man made a career out of writing the kind of songs that would make your grandmother clutch her pearls and whisper a prayer. He reveled in controversy, using his music to poke fun at authority and make people laugh at the things they weren't supposed to talk about. But on March 13th, 1998, the joke was on him. He was on stage in Canterbury, England, doing what he did best, making people laugh, dance, and forget about the dullness of life when his heart decided to call it quits. He collapsed mid-performance. Before the audience could process what was happening, he was gone. Just like that. 1 minute he was a larger-than-life performer. The next he was a legend frozen in time. No grand exit, no farewell tour. Just an artist who quite literally died doing what he loved. The news of his passing sent ripples through the reggae and ska communities. Judge Dredd had always been an unconventional star. And in the end, even his death played by its own rules. In a way, it was fitting. He had never been one for theatrics outside of his lyrics, and he certainly didn't plan a dramatic, drawn-out farewell. Instead, his final moments were spent in the place that mattered most to him, the stage. His music was often dismissed by critics as nothing more than comedic novelty. But those who understood him knew he was more than that. He was a force of nature. A man who challenged the status quo with humor and irreverence. And when he left this world, he did it without warning, without pretense. Just a sudden, brutal departure that made sure no one would ever forget him. Tiny Tim, Heart Attack at Gala in Minneapolis. Tiny Tim wasn't just a musician. He was a walking paradox wrapped in a ukulele and a falsetto voice that left people both enchanted and slightly unsettled. He wasn't your typical rock star, not even close. But somehow, he made sure you couldn't look away. Whether you were laughing, cringing, or genuinely vibing with his music, he got a reaction. And that's more than most artists can say. Fast forward to November 30th, 1996, at a gala in Minneapolis. He took the stage one last time, frail, but still clinging to the one thing that defined him: performing. He gave the audience what they came for: his signature oddball charm, the unmistakable warble of Tiptoe Through the Tulips. And then, just like that, he was gone. A heart attack cut the show short. A tragic yet fitting curtain call for a man who lived for the spotlight. The warning signs had been there for years. His health was failing. Doctors practically begged him to slow down. But telling Tiny Tim to take it easy was like telling a storm to stop blowing. He kept pushing himself because that's who he was. He wasn't built for longevity. He knew that. But he also knew that a life without performing wasn't much of a life at all. So he kept going. Until, well, he couldn't. His final act wasn't some over-the-top rock and roll exit. No wild theatrics, no shocking scandal. Just a man who lived and breathed music, taking his last breath doing what he loved. It was almost poetic in its simplicity. But even in death, he made sure people kept talking. Because whether you adored him or found him bizarre beyond belief, you remembered him. Tiny Tim was never meant to fit the mold. And he never tried. He defied expectations, ignored the naysayers, and leaned into his own weirdness without a second thought. And that's why decades later, we're still talking about him. Mark Sandman, Morphine, Heart Attack in Italy.
And tell me where is the taste?
Imagine crafting a unique sound, building a dedicated following, and then dropping dead right in front of your audience. That's exactly what happened to Mark Sandman, the genius behind Morphine. The band that turned alternative rock into something smoother, cooler, and strangely hypnotic. It was July 3rd, 1999, in Palestrina, Italy. He was mid-performance, probably lost in the groove, when his body decided it had enough. One moment the music was flowing. The next, Sandman collapsed on stage, never to get up again. The official cause, heart attack. But let's be real, this was a guy who lived life hard, pushed boundaries, and played like there was no tomorrow. Turns out there really wasn't. What made it even more tragic was that Sandman wasn't just another musician. He was an innovator, a guy who played a two-bass and made it work. He crafted songs that felt like late-night confessions set to jazz-infused rock. Losing him meant losing a sound that was both eerie and intoxicating. How's this for a lasting impression? The man literally played himself to death. Talk about leaving everything on the stage. It was a poetic yet devastating way for a musician so embedded in his craft to go. His fans didn't just lose a performer. They lost an entire musical philosophy in one crushing moment. Morphine was never about mainstream success. It was about making music that felt different. Sandman's haunting voice, minimalist approach, and almost inexplicable ability to mix rock with jazz made the band one of a kind. His death wasn't just a tragedy for his bandmates. It was a full stop at the end of a story that should have had so many more chapters. David Olney, Peaceful Collapse in Florida.
See Kenny's face, in the window his eyes were shut.
Most performers would probably panic if they felt their body giving out in front of a live audience. Not David Olney. The folk singer-songwriter, born on March 23, 1948, was mid-performance at the 30A Songwriters Festival in Florida on January 18, 2020, when something wasn't quite right. Did he freak out? No. Did he collapse in a dramatic, attention-grabbing way? Not even close. He simply paused, mumbled an apology, and sat still. And that was it. Just like that, he was gone. It was an oddly poetic exit for a man whose music was filled with stories of love, loss, and life's inevitable tragedies. He spent his life crafting songs that felt like old souls whispering forgotten tales. And in the end, he became one of them. Over 20 albums to his name. His music touched countless lives, and his words were borrowed by other artists who understood the depth of his songwriting. The irony? If anyone had written a song about a musician dying peacefully mid-performance, it only probably would have been the one to do it. There was something almost eerie about the way he went. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't a sudden collapse that left people in shock. It was stillness, as if he knew this was the last note in the song of his life. Those who were there didn't even realize what had happened at first. It was the kind of death that felt like it belonged in a story rather than reality. But it was real, and it left an impact. The man had spent his entire life performing, telling stories, sharing music, and in the end, he left doing exactly that. Bruce Hampton, 70-year-old on his birthday.
Let it shine on me, and let it shine.
A performer collapses mid-show, and the crowd thinks it's all part of the act, until it's not. That's exactly what went down on May 1st, 2017, when Bruce Hampton, an icon in the jam band scene, decided to make his exit in the most theatrical way possible. It was his 70th birthday celebration. The stage was packed with musicians honoring him. The Fox Theater in Atlanta was buzzing with energy. Then, right at the encore, Hampton fell. The crowd cheered. The band kept playing. Everyone thought it was another one of his bizarre performance stunts. Except this time, he didn't get up. When reality finally sunk in, it was too late. Hampton had left the building. Figuratively and literally. It was a fitting end for a man whose entire career thrived on pushing musical boundaries, creating strange hypnotic sounds, and mentoring the next generation of experimental artists. The man blurred the lines between reality and performance so much that even his death felt like part of the act. If there's an afterlife, he's probably still improvising. Hampton wasn't your typical rock star, but he was a force in the music world. He created a space where musicians could experiment, break rules, and find their own voices. That final show wasn't just another concert. It was a testament to everything he had built. He went out surrounded by music, laughter, and the energy of a crowd that adored him. It was almost as if he planned it that way. In a way, he left the perfect final scene. One that no one saw coming until it was over. Scott Johnson. Stage roof collapse at Radiohead concert. Scott Johnson wasn't the star of the show. He was the guy making sure everything was in place so the stars could shine. But on June 16th, 2012, while setting up for a Radiohead concert at Downsview Park in Toronto, everything went horribly wrong. The stage roof collapsed, eliminating him instantly, and injuring 3 other crew members. 1 second he was working, doing what he loved. The next, he was gone. Crushed under the very stage meant to bring music to thousands. This wasn't just a freak accident. It was an outright disaster that led to lawsuits, investigations, and a whole lot of finger-pointing. The music industry thrives on spectacle. But this was a harsh reminder that behind every massive show, there are people risking their lives to make it happen. Johnson may not have been a rock star in the traditional sense, but he died making sure the music played on. And when the dust settled, his death forced the industry to take a hard look at how it treats the people working behind the scenes. Concerts are supposed to be controlled chaos, a safe kind of reckless energy where the only thing getting destroyed is the crowd's sense of restraint. But that stage collapse exposed the brutal reality. Sometimes the chaos gets out of hand. His death didn't just shake up Radiohead and their crew, it rattled the entire industry. Suddenly, safety wasn't just an afterthought, and people started asking tough questions about how live events were being managed. Atsushi Sakurai, buck tick, brainstem hemorrhage. Atsushi Sakurai wasn't just a singer, he was a force. The kind of performer who could hold an audience captive with nothing but his voice and presence. Born on March 7, 1966, in Fujioka, Japan, he spent decades shaping the sound of Buck Tick, a band that refused to fade into the background. With his deep, commanding vocals and an aura that was equal parts elegance and danger, Sakurai became an icon in Japan's rock scene. The man had a way of making every lyric feel like it was ripped straight from his soul. And fans felt that. He wasn't just singing, he was bleeding emotions into the mic. Night after night, that dedication would prove to be his undoing. On October 19th, 2023, Buck Tick took the stage at KT Zepp Yokohama. The air was thick with anticipation. Fans had come to witness the spectacle. And Sakurai wasn't one to disappoint. But something was off. Maybe it was the way he moved a fraction slower than usual, or how his voice carried a strain that wasn't part of the act. In the middle of the set, his body betrayed him. He showed clear signs of distress before being rushed off stage. The hospital was only minutes away. But time wasn't on his side. A brainstem hemorrhage had already sealed his fate. He died that night, leaving behind a stunned crowd and a legacy cut brutally short. 1 second, a rock god commanding the stage. The next, a life extinguished. Ken Snakehips Johnson, killed in German bombing raid. Ken Snakehips Johnson wasn't just a musician, he was a force. He moved like silk, danced like he had no bones, and led a band, the West Indian Dance Orchestra, that could set any place on fire with rhythm. The West Indian Dance Orchestra wasn't just a group. They were the sound of a London that wanted to shake off the weight of war, if only for a few hours. Johnson? He was the heartbeat. When he took the stage, you weren't just watching a performer. You were getting lost in something bigger than yourself. And then, March 8th, 1941 happened. The Café de Paris was packed. Glimmering, alive, a safe haven where war felt like a distant nightmare. The music was rich. The crowd was swaying. The night was golden. But war doesn't wait for the perfect moment to ruin everything. In a single breath, the glamour turned to rubble. A German bomb cut through the ceiling, shattering the illusion and taking Johnson with it. 1 minute he was electrifying the room. The next he was gone. Just like that, the Blitz had already stolen so much. But this hit differently. London lost a sound, a soul, a man who gave people a reason to dance when everything else told them to despair. Snakehips should have had decades of music left in him. Instead, all that remained was silence, smoke, and the chilling reminder that war doesn't care who you are. It takes what it wants. And that night, it took a legend. Leonard Warren, mid-aria at the Metropolitan Opera House. Leonard Warren was one of the greatest baritones of his era, a man at the absolute peak of his powers, commanding some of the world's most prestigious stages, a voice that could make audiences weep. And then, on January 16th, 1960, at the Metropolitan Opera House in New York, he was performing La Forza del Destino, the Force of Destiny. He was in the middle of the aria di Provenza il Mar, the song about the memories of his homeland. The irony of dying during an aria about destiny and fate is almost too much to bear. He was mid-performance, his voice soaring through the theater, when his body simply gave out. He collapsed on stage. The orchestra stopped. The audience sat in stunned silence. This was Leonard Warren, a titan of the opera world, a man who had sung thousands of performances without incident, a man at the absolute peak of his craft. And in a single moment, he was gone. 53 years old, in front of thousands of people, doing the one thing he was born to do. The silence in that theater was absolute. No one moved, no one spoke. They had all just watched a legend be taken away mid-song. It was a stroke that killed him. A sudden, complete, and utter departure from a stage that had been his life. His final aria was his final breath. And somehow, tragically, it was fitting. What you just watched is 15 documented accounts. 15 stories of artists who gave everything on stage. Literally everything. Some from illness, some from accidents, some from violence. one from war itself. And the one thing they all have in common? They were taken while doing what they loved, while performing, while creating, while giving their souls to audiences who had come to witness something special. That's the thing about live music. It's dangerous. It's unpredictable. It requires artists to be completely vulnerable in front of thousands of strangers. And sometimes, tragedy strikes. Sometimes, the music stops forever. But here's the thing these artists left behind. They left behind performances. They left behind moments. They left behind the memory of what it felt like when they were alive and giving everything they had. That matters. That lives on. So here's what I need from you. 1. Subscribe to this channel. We're bringing you the real stories, the documented accounts, the details that matter. 2. Join the membership. 1 coffee a month. That's all. That's how we keep this going without cutting corners on research. 3. Watch another video. This channel is full of documented rock and music history that doesn't make the highlight reels. We've got stories. They're all real. 4. Think about what this means. These were people who changed your life through their music. And many of them left this world doing what they loved. On the stage. In front of audiences. Creating right up to their final moment. That's a legacy. That's what we should remember. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about the real stories. Thank you for wanting to know what actually happened, not what the mythology tells you happened. That's what this channel is built on. The truth. Even when it's tragic. Even when it's hard to hear. The music stopped for these 15 artists. But their impact never will.